At 32, my name is Madison Reynolds, and I never anticipated that words spoken by my father could still wound me so deeply. Our yearly Thanksgiving gathering in Boston typically commenced with genuine embraces and lighthearted conversation, but the arrival of dessert introduced a tension more piercing than any winter draft. "You are the most self-absorbed child I have ever known," Dad declared, striking the surface of our maple dining table with his fist. My mother's gaze fell, fixated on her half-eaten slice of pumpkin pie, while my sister Olivia offered a silent, confirming nod. A decade of financial sacrifice replayed in my mind's eye as accusations flew, landing amid scattered cranberry sauce. I felt my chest tighten, and in that instant, my personal truth became starkly clear. If you've ever felt the sting of being misunderstood by those closest to you, share your location in the comments below, and join me and others who have found their voice when it truly mattered by subscribing. Growing up in the suburban outskirts of Boston, our way of life was comfortably middle class. We weren't extravagant, but essential needs were always met. For close to 20 years, my father managed production at Franklin Manufacturing, while my mother juggled part-time administrative duties with the demands of running our household. We resided in a modest colonial-style house within a tight-knit community where everyone was familiar with one another, attended Friday night high school football games, and helped clear driveways during the harsh Massachusetts winters. Our family dynamic shifted dramatically during my second year at Boston University. Franklin Manufacturing implemented significant workforce reductions, and my father was among those laid off. At 20 years old, I was just barely managing my own expenses when the stability of our family's foundation suddenly fractured. The recession had severely impacted industries, and at 53, Dad found himself competing against younger, less expensive candidates in a contracting job market. His unemployment benefits provided only a fraction of his prior income, and my mother's part-time earnings couldn't bridge the substantial gap. Mortgage payments began to fall behind as their savings quickly dwindled. I vividly recall the evening my mother phoned, her voice trembling as she explained they had received a foreclosure notice. Without a second thought, I took on additional work, waiting tables at Marino's Italian restaurant on weekends, tutoring calculus on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and working at the campus bookstore between classes. Sleep became a rare luxury as I strove to maintain my scholarship requirements while sending home every dollar I could manage to save. By my final year of university, I was contributing close to 60% of their monthly mortgage payment, all while watching my classmates plan international post-graduation trips. When Olivia received a diagnosis of Hashimoto's thyroiditis during her first year at UMass, the specialized treatments required were not fully covered by our parents' downgraded insurance plan. I made the difficult decision to postpone my plans for graduate school, accepting instead an entry-level position at Freeman Financial Advisors. My economics degree was channeled into a steady paycheck, primarily intended to help cover Olivia's significant medical expenses. The extensive overtime hours and relentless networking efforts paid off over the next 5 years, as I advanced from analyst to associate to senior consultant. Each promotion didn't bring additional personal comforts, but rather an increased capacity to financially support my struggling family. My own living situation remained a small one-bedroom apartment in Somerville, furnished mostly with items acquired from secondhand shops and during holiday sales, while roughly 40% of my income flowed back into my parents' household. Dad eventually found employment as a shift supervisor at a warehouse facility, earning approximately half his previous salary, a wage that came with double the physical toll on his aging body. Mom increased her hours at the doctor's office where she worked, but her administrative income barely offset the rising costs of utilities and property taxes in our neighborhood, which was becoming increasingly gentrified. Meanwhile, Olivia graduated with a communications degree, but transitioned between unpaid internships and temporary roles. often returning home between jobs, and frequently expecting me to cover her car payments during these transitional periods. What began as emergency assistance gradually evolved into expected monthly contributions. I covered necessary home repairs, paid insurance premiums, contributed to property taxes, and financed family vacations under the guise of thoughtful gifts, all while meticulously maintaining spreadsheets documenting every dollar spent. Throughout this period, initial appreciation slowly morphed into expectation, then entitlement, and finally outright criticism, when my financial assistance didn't expand proportionally with each modest salary increase. "You should see the bonus Mitchell's son gave them for their anniversary," Mom would remark casually during our Sunday calls. Or, "The Hendersons' daughter bought them a new car for Christmas," as if these examples should establish the benchmark for my own giving. Dad became increasingly critical of my career path, suggesting I wasn't assertive enough in pursuing promotions, or questioning why I hadn't moved into investment banking, where, in his view, the real money was made. The fact that I had sacrificed my own financial stability, delayed retirement savings, and postponed personal milestones like purchasing a home seemed to fade from their memory, replaced by comparisons to seemingly fictional peers who apparently supported their families with greater generosity. No one appeared to notice my delayed gratification or question why a senior financial consultant continued to live like a recent graduate, drove a 10-year-old sedan, or never took vacations that weren't centered around familial obligations back home. Thanksgiving had always held a particular significance in the Reynolds family, a time when typical tensions temporarily receded beneath the comforting aroma of roasting turkey and Mom's signature sage dressing. This year, I had indulged in a premium bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, despite my tightly managed monthly budget, and dedicated my Tuesday evening to preparing homemade cranberry orange relish and a butternut squash casserole to bring to the meal. My small kitchen offered limited space for my culinary ambitions, but I was determined to contribute something special to the family table. That morning, I called Lauren, my closest friend since college, while adding the final touches to my pumpkin cheesecake. "I got the promotion," I told her, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I wrapped aluminum foil around the springform pan. "Senior portfolio manager. It's official as of yesterday afternoon," Lauren squealed with appropriate enthusiasm, demanding details about the salary increase and my new responsibilities. When she inquired if I had shared the news with my family yet, my excitement noticeably dimmed. "I'm saving it for today," I admitted, recalling the previous year's Christmas dinner when Dad had responded to news of my quarterly performance bonus with a dismissive, "About time they recognized your value," before immediately asking if this meant I could finally help them replace their aging water heater. "Just remember what Dr. Winters said about boundaries," Lauren cautioned, referencing my therapist's ongoing suggestions to establish healthier financial dynamics within my family relationships. For 6 months, I had been consulting with Dr. Winters, a compassionate psychologist specializing in family dynamics, who had gently but persistently encouraged me to recognize patterns of financial exploitation within my family relationships. "You're not their retirement plan," she had reminded me during our most recent session, "and love shouldn't come with a price tag." I nodded in agreement, while simultaneously dismissing the practical possibility of actually implementing such boundaries. These were the individuals who had raised me, supported my educational pursuits, and celebrated my graduations. How could I abruptly begin saying no? The drive to my parents' house that afternoon was charged with conflicting emotions: pride in my professional achievement, hope for a genuine celebration of my success, anxiety about the inevitable financial discussions, and a thin, unacknowledged thread of resentment. New England's vibrant autumn splendor had faded into the starkness of early winter, bare maple branches reaching like arthritic fingers against a slate gray sky that threatened snow by evening. I arrived 20 minutes early, armed with rehearsed responses prepared for the usual subtle criticisms and financial probes. Mom greeted me with her characteristic warm embrace, the comforting scent of cinnamon and nutmeg clinging to her cardigan, exclaiming delightedly over my contributions to the meal. Dad offered a firm handshake and a pat on the shoulder, his standard expression of affection, before returning to the football game blaring from the living room television. Olivia arrived shortly thereafter, accompanied by her newest boyfriend, Trevor, a graphic designer with an impressively sculpted beard and captivating stories about his recent transformative trip to Thailand. My sister had dramatically altered her appearance since I had last seen her at Labor Day. Her previously shoulder-length brown hair was now a platinum blonde pixie cut that accentuated her angular features. She offered only a distracted, "That's great, Mads," in response to my promotion announcement before launching into an elaborate account of her aspirations to launch a wellness coaching business, complete with vision boards and manifestation journals, yet notably devoid of any mention of initial startup capital sources. The early dinner conversation maintained a superficial veneer of normalcy, discussions of distant relatives' health, neighborhood developments, and Trevor's enthusiastic explanations of Thai street food culture. Yet, subtle undercurrents of tension surfaced between passing dishes and complimenting Mom's cooking. Dad mentioned the Johnsons next door had installed a custom outdoor kitchen for summer entertaining. Mom casually referenced their upcoming 40th anniversary, emphasizing how their friends, the Williamsons, had renewed their vows in Bermuda. Olivia expertly steered conversations toward her entrepreneurial vision, dropping hints about initial investment needs and startup costs, with the precision of guided missiles aimed directly at my recently improved financial situation. Each comment landed like tiny paper cuts, individually insignificant, but cumulatively painful as they accumulated throughout the meal. I maintained my composure, redirecting conversations toward neutral ground, while silently calculating how much of my promotion-related increase was already being mentally allocated by family members who hadn't bothered to inquire about the additional responsibilities accompanying my salary adjustment. The atmosphere grew increasingly strained as dessert arrived, punctuated by Mom's subtle sighs when I declined to comment on their anniversary plans and Dad's pointed remarks about career-focused individuals who forget what really matters in life. My carefully constructed facade began to show hairline fractures. As Olivia described her wellness business concept for the third time, now including specific figures for website development costs and business coaching programs she'd researched, and when Trevor enthusiastically suggested I could easily write a check for such a modest amount, given my fancy finance job, something within me shifted almost imperceptibly, like the initial tremor preceding a landslide. The breaking point arrived unexpectedly over Mom's pumpkin pie, triggered when Dad inquired about my retirement planning, not out of concern for my future, but as a launching point for his own financial anxieties. "You must have a substantial 401k by now," he remarked between bites of whipped cream-topped dessert. "The market's been favorable to conservative investors." I took a slow sip of coffee, composing myself before responding truthfully. "Actually, I've had to scale back my retirement contributions this year. I'm trying to save for a down payment on a condo." The sudden silence around the table felt like a vacuum, sucking away the oxygen and leaving only tension in its wake. Dad's fork clattered against his dessert plate as his expression darkened. "A condo? You're thinking about real estate? Now? What about helping your mother and me with the property tax increase? It's gone up 12% this year alone." My stomach tightened as I carefully measured my response. "I've been helping with your mortgage and utilities for almost a decade, Dad. At some point, I need to start building my own future too." His face flushed crimson, starting at his neck and spreading upward like mercury in a thermometer. "Your own future," he sputtered, his voice escalating with each syllable. "While we've been struggling to keep our home, while your sister can barely afford her medications," he slammed his palm against the table, causing the silverware to jump. "You're the most selfish son I've ever known, never making any real sacrifices for this family." The word son struck me like a physical blow. Dad still occasionally used male pronouns, despite my corrections years ago. Worse was the absolute conviction in his voice, as he completely rewrote a decade of my financial support into a narrative of pure selfishness. Mom stared fixedly at her half-eaten pie, her shoulders hunched as though attempting to physically shrink from the confrontation. Across the table, Olivia nodded vigorously, emboldened by Dad's outburst. "Seriously, Madison, you live in your bubble of promotions and career success, while the rest of us struggle. When was the last time you really sacrificed anything?" Her boyfriend Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly intensely interested in the pattern on his dessert plate. "Remember when you couldn't help with my business concept last spring because you were saving for a vacation?" Olivia continued, making air quotes with her fingers. "Meanwhile, I'm still driving a car with no air conditioning and a check engine light that's been on since June." The accusations continued to fly across the cranberry-stained tablecloth. Complaints about my expensive haircuts, a $30 trim every 8 weeks, my lavish lifestyle, my one-bedroom apartment with secondhand furniture, and my exotic vacations, a weekend trip to a friend's wedding in Chicago last year. Each comment twisted reality more severely, creating a funhouse mirror reflection of my actual life that I barely recognized. Something crystallized within me in that moment, a clarity that cut through years of guilt and obligation like sunlight through a dense fog. Without uttering a word, I stood up and walked calmly to my car, ignoring the confused calls from behind me. For years, I had meticulously maintained records of every financial contribution to my family, partly for tax purposes, partly from the financial consultant's instinct to track expenses, but perhaps unconsciously preparing for exactly this moment. The accordion folder sat in my trunk, organized by year and category, containing copies of every check, transfer, receipt, and bill payment confirmation since my senior year of college. The weight of it in my hands felt simultaneously lighter than expected and incredibly significant. As I walked back into the suddenly quiet dining room, I stated calmly, "I've been called many things in my life, but selfish isn't one I'm willing to accept." I placed the folder on the table between the pumpkin pie and the cranberry relish. This contains records of everything I've contributed to this family over the past 10 years. I opened the folder methodically, removing the summary spreadsheet I had updated just the previous month. This first page shows the totals by category: mortgage assistance, medical bills, car payments, insurance premiums, property taxes, utility bills, home repairs, and miscellaneous expenses. The columns of figures stood in stark contrast to the emotional accusations still hanging in the air. $48,652 toward the mortgage when you nearly lost the house during Dad's unemployment. $32,579 for Olivia's medical treatments and medications not covered by insurance. $27,300 for property taxes over the last 8 years. $22,315 for home repairs, including the roof replacement, water heater, and electrical system upgrade. I continued through the categories dispassionately, as though presenting financial data to clients rather than my own family. $14,890 for Dad's medical expenses after the warehouse accident when workers' comp was delayed. $18,250 for Mom's dental work and eye surgeries. $9,275 toward Olivia's car payments and insurance during her between jobs periods. With each figure, my family's expression shifted. Dad's anger gradually gave way to palpable discomfort. Mom's practiced avoidance transformed into wide-eyed shock. Olivia's self-righteousness melted into visible embarrassment. The grand total, I concluded, tapping the bold figure at the bottom of the page, is $175,842 over 10 years. That's almost 30% of my post-tax income during that period. Trevor whispered something that sounded like, "Holy shit," under his breath, while Olivia shot him a silencing glare. This doesn't include Christmas gifts, birthday presents, or family vacations I funded, I added, closing the folder gently. Nor does it account for the graduate degree I didn't pursue, the promotions I didn't take because they required relocation, or the retirement savings I've postponed. My voice remained steady, despite the emotion building in my chest. I've lived in the same one-bedroom apartment for 8 years, drive a car with 140,000 miles on it, and own exactly 2 professional suits that I alternate for important meetings. I haven't taken a non-family vacation in 5 years. I looked directly at my father, whose face had drained of its earlier color. I'm not sharing this because I expect gratitude or repayment. I helped because that's what family does. But I cannot accept being called selfish by the very people who have benefited from my sacrifices for the past decade. The silence following my speech stretched like an elastic band, ready to snap, charged with stunned recognition as my family processed the documented reality of my financial support. Dad's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, while Mom's hand trembled as she reached toward the folder, hesitating before making contact, as though it might burn her fingers. "This doesn't mean I don't love you," I continued, my voice softening slightly. "But it does mean I deserve basic respect and acknowledgement of my contributions, rather than criticism for finally considering my own future." Without dramatic flourish or raised voice, I gathered my coat from the hallway rack, picked up my purse, and headed toward the door. I'll be taking a step back from financial support while I reassess our relationship. The mortgage payment, utilities, and Olivia's car insurance will clear this month, since they're on automatic payment, but I'll be canceling those arrangements tomorrow. No one moved to stop me as I walked out, closing the front door firmly behind me. The crisp November air hit my face like a wake-up call, carrying the scent of wood smoke from neighboring chimneys and the promise of the season's first snow. Only when I was safely inside my car, 3 blocks away from my parents' home, did the emotional dam break. My hands shook so violently, I had to pull over, unable to see through the tears suddenly flowing unchecked down my face. 10 years of suppressed resentment, unacknowledged hurt, and financial stress erupted in gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath against the steering wheel. My phone began buzzing incessantly within minutes. First, text messages from Olivia. "You can't just drop a bomb like that and leave." Then voicemails from Mom. "Please come back so we can discuss this calmly." And finally, increasingly urgent calls from Dad that I declined without listening to his messages. The cascade of notifications eventually became so distracting that I silenced my phone entirely, focusing instead on navigating the slicked roads toward the only place I could think to go. Lauren answered her door in flannel pajama pants and an oversized Harvard sweatshirt, her expression shifting instantly from confusion to concern as she registered my tear-stained face. "Oh, honey," she whispered, pulling me into a fierce hug without requiring explanation. "Come in." Her apartment offered everything mine couldn't in that moment. Physical distance from my family, the emotional safety of 20 years of friendship, and a perspective unclouded by familial obligation. Lauren listened without interruption as I recounted the dinner confrontation, pouring us both generous glasses of Merlot and occasionally squeezing my hand in silent support. "You know this was inevitable, right?" she finally said when I'd exhausted my narrative. "Dr. Winters has been predicting this blow-up for months." She tucked her legs beneath her on the sofa, studying me with a direct gaze that had intimidated our college classmates, but always represented unvarnished truth to me. "You've been their financial safety net for so long, they stopped seeing the net and started believing they could fly on their own." The metaphor struck me with unexpected clarity. I hadn't been helping my family stand on their own, but rather enabling a precarious situation where they remained perpetually dependent, while simultaneously resenting that dependence. Lauren offered her guest room without hesitation, when I confessed I couldn't face returning to my empty apartment just yet. "Stay as long as you need," she insisted, providing a toothbrush still in its packaging and a set of clean pajamas. Consider it a repayment for all those calculus tutoring sessions sophomore year. Despite physical exhaustion, sleep proved elusive that night as my mind endlessly replayed the dinner confrontation, generating alternative scenarios and imagining conversations yet to come. My phone continued its muted vibration on the nightstand. 17 missed calls, 34 text messages, and counting by morning. Emotional exhaustion had settled into a strange calm, like the eerie stillness after a devastating storm. Over coffee, Lauren and I strategized my next steps with the clinical precision of the financial consultants we both were. First, practical matters, like changing automatic payments and securing my financial accounts. Then emotional boundaries, including a suggested no-contact period to allow everyone processing time. "Remember that establishing boundaries isn't punishment," Lauren reminded me, echoing Dr. Winter's frequent refrain. "It's creating healthy space for relationships to potentially heal." Despite the rational approach, waves of conflicting emotions continued washing over me throughout the day. Liberation intermingled with grief, determination shadowed by guilt, clarity followed by uncertainty. Each notification from my family triggered fresh anxiety, yet I maintained my digital distance, focusing instead on the practical steps that would establish my newfound boundaries.
Monday morning found me at my bank branch when they opened, systematically removing automatic payments to my parents' mortgage company, utility providers, and Olivia's various expenses.
The personal banker's expression remained professionally neutral as I closed joint accounts established for emergency access that had become conduits for regular withdrawals. By afternoon, I'd contacted my therapist for an emergency session, submitted paperwork for my new apartment lease application, and begun the process of untangling nearly a decade of financial enmeshment from what should have been simple family ties. While I focused on rebuilding boundaries, my family experienced the progressive stages of financial withdrawal with increasing desperation. Their initial responses, primarily anger and accusations of cruelty, gradually transformed as practical realities emerged in the days following Thanksgiving. Dad discovered the precariousness of their situation first when he attempted to make an online purchase and found their joint credit card declined due to reaching its limit, a card I'd been making minimum payments on for years. His blustering voicemail about account errors quickly gave way to confusion when the customer service representative explained no payment had been received that month. The mortgage company's automated reminder about their upcoming payment arrived in my parents' inbox Tuesday morning, triggering Mom's first attempt at reconciliation. A carefully worded text message expressing concern about a misunderstanding rather than acknowledging their financial dependence. By Wednesday afternoon, Olivia received notification that her car insurance policy would be canceled effective December 1st due to non-payment, prompting a flurry of increasingly panic-stricken messages alternating between accusations, "How could you do this without warning?" and bargaining, "I have an interview next week. Just need coverage until then." Their escalating crisis became evident through Lauren's reports, as my family had begun contacting mutual acquaintances in attempts to reach me after I maintained my digital silence. "Your mom called my mother," Lauren informed me over lunch near my office on Thursday. "Apparently, they're scrambling to figure out which bills are overdue and which ones are about to hit. Your dad didn't even know their property taxes are due quarterly." The knowledge brought complex emotions, concern for their welfare battling against the recognition that this financial awakening was long overdue. Meanwhile, family mythology began rewriting itself in my absence. Through mutual connections, I learned my parents had convened an emergency family meeting, including my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, and my father's brother, Uncle Robert, ostensibly to discuss Madison's breakdown and concerning behavior. According to Lauren's mother, who heard from Aunt Patricia directly, my dramatic exit was being characterized as an ungrateful daughter's tantrum, rather than a legitimate boundary setting after years of exploitation. She's always been emotionally fragile, my mother reportedly confided to relatives, conveniently omitting any mention of the financial receipts I'd presented or the years of unacknowledged support. Uncle Robert, a retired accountant with a lifelong commitment to financial independence, apparently requested clarification about these financial allegations, creating the first crack in their revisionist narrative. When confronted with the specific figures I documented, my parents reluctantly confirmed the general magnitude while downplaying their significance, characterizing my contributions as occasional help during rough patches, rather than the systematic support they actually represented. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, genuine financial panic set in as mortgage payment reminders escalated to late notices and utility companies sent disconnection warnings. My father's modest warehouse supervisor salary and mother's administrative position provided barely enough for basic living expenses, much less the additional financial obligations I had been quietly handling. With December's bills looming and holiday expenses approaching, they faced the staggering reality of their dependence. Olivia experienced perhaps the most dramatic awakening, having never fully supported herself despite being 27 years old. Her wellness coaching business concept rapidly receded from Instagram-worthy vision boards to practical impossibility as she confronted her complete lack of emergency savings or independent credit history. Her boyfriend, Trevor, initially sympathetic to her plight, began distancing himself as Olivia's financial requests shifted from her absent sister to him. The timing proved particularly challenging as the holiday season approached, amplifying both emotional and financial pressures. Christmas decorations appeared throughout their neighborhood, while my parents calculated whether they could afford their electric bill. Holiday party invitations arrived as Olivia realized she couldn't make her car payment. Festive advertisements promoted luxury gifts, while my family confronted the possibility of genuine hardship for the first time in years. 3 weeks into their financial reckoning, desperation drove my father to an unexpected action, contacting Dr. Winters through information he found on a therapy receipt in their files. His voicemail, which she described in carefully non-specific terms during our session, apparently included both accusations about my abandonment and genuine confusion about how they would manage without my assistance. Your father seems to be experiencing the beginning stages of recognition, Dr. Winters noted with professional neutrality. His anger is still predominant, but questions are emerging about how this situation developed. She recommended maintaining my boundaries while acknowledging the genuinely difficult transition my family faced. Their financial recalibration isn't punishment, she reminded me, but rather a necessary step toward healthier relationships for everyone involved. The holiday season intensified both practical challenges and emotional manipulation attempts. Christmas had always been primarily my financial responsibility. From gifts for extended family to holiday meal ingredients to the family's annual New Year's Eve dinner at Giovanni's Italian restaurant. My absence from these traditions created both practical voids and opportunities for painting me as the villain in our family story. Social media became their primary battlefield, as Mom posted wistful throwback photos of happier family times, while Olivia shared cryptic quotes about discovering who truly cares during difficult times. The digital guilt campaign backfired when family friends who knew of my consistent support began questioning these one-sided narratives, creating uncomfortable moments when relatives inquired about the specific circumstances of our estrangement. By mid-December, financial reality had thoroughly dismantled my family's initial righteous indignation. The mortgage company's final notice arrived with threat of foreclosure proceedings after the new year. The electric company implemented their winter program, preventing complete disconnection but reducing service to minimum levels. Olivia's car was repossessed 3 days before Christmas, leaving her dependent on unreliable public transportation in our suburban neighborhood. The practical consequences of financial independence proved far more challenging than the angry declarations of managing just fine without Madison's help that had followed my initial departure. While my family grappled with financial independence, I embarked on an unexpected journey of personal rediscovery. The first month following our confrontation brought practical changes. Signing a lease on a slightly larger apartment in a neighborhood I'd previously considered beyond my reach. Opening a high-yield savings account for my overdue home down payment fund. And calculating retirement contribution increases with my company's financial advisor. Yet, the most profound transformations occurred internally during weekly sessions with Dr. Winters, who guided me through recognizing patterns established long before our Thanksgiving confrontation. Your sense of responsibility for your family's financial welfare didn't develop overnight, she observed during a particularly intense session. We need to examine the beliefs that made their dependence seemed normal to you for so long. Through careful exploration, we identified formative experiences that had shaped my perception of family obligation. Watching my father support his aging parents, absorbing cultural messages about eldest daughter's responsibilities, and internalizing my mother's frequent praise for putting family first. These discoveries didn't diminish my love for my family, but contextualized the unhealthy dynamics that had evolved over time. Boundaries aren't about stopping care, Dr. Winters emphasized, but about ensuring care flows in multiple directions, rather than being constantly drained from one source. The financial breathing room created by redirecting family funds toward my own future brought unexpected emotional shifts as well. Without constant calculations about supporting others, I reconnected with interests long abandoned due to time or monetary constraints. A community dance studio offered adult ballet classes that awakened muscle memory from childhood lessons, discontinued due to college expenses. Being the 32-year-old beginner among graceful 20-somethings initially triggered self-consciousness, until the instructor noted my unusual persistence during challenging combinations. "You've got natural discipline," she remarked after my 4th class. "That's rarer than natural talent." The Wednesday evening classes became sacred appointments with myself. 90 minutes when financial spreadsheets and family complications dissolved into pure physical focus and classical melodies. Other dormant interests resurfaced, as though previously submerged beneath family obligations. Joining a local book club focused on international literature, volunteering monthly at a financial literacy program for high school students, accepting weekend hiking invitations previously declined due to family commitments back in Boston, a casual coffee meeting with Ryan Parker, a corporate attorney I'd met through the volunteer program, evolved into dinner conversations that extended past restaurant closing times. His thoughtful questions about my career aspirations and genuine interest in my rediscovered ballet passion contrasted sharply with family interactions, centered around what I could provide rather than who I was becoming. "You light up when you talk about your students at the literacy program," he noted during our 3rd dinner together. "Have you considered teaching as a long-term path?" Such questions about my authentic desires, rather than others' expectations, felt revolutionary after years of family discussions focused exclusively on financial practicalities. Professional recognition arrived alongside personal growth when my firm's managing director praised my contributions to a particularly challenging client portfolio. "You've shown exceptional focus these past few months," she noted during our quarterly review. The Stevens account turnaround was impressive work. The acknowledgement of my value without accompanying financial requests felt refreshingly straightforward, reinforcing Dr. Winters' observations about healthy versus extractive relationships. Support emerged from unexpected sources as word of my family estrangement circulated through extended family channels. Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, who had maintained financial independence despite similar economic setbacks, reached out with a perspective that validated my difficult decision. Your father and I were raised with the same values, but made different choices when challenges hit, he shared during a lengthy phone conversation. I worked 3 jobs during the recession rather than leaning on my children. That wasn't easy, but it was necessary. His insight into my father's psychology provided context without excusing the exploitation I'd experienced. Your dad interpreted accepting help as personal failure, Uncle Robert explained. The longer it continued, the more he needed to justify it by painting you as owing that support rather than providing it generously. This perspective helped dissolve lingering guilt about enforcing boundaries that my family experienced as abandonment. Meanwhile, the approaching holiday season, traditionally spent navigating family tensions in Boston, loomed as both a challenge and an opportunity. For the first time in my adult life, Christmas wouldn't revolve around managing my parents' financial expectations and Olivia's thinly veiled requests disguised as gift suggestions. Lauren's invitation to join her family's Christmas Eve celebration provided a bridge between old traditions and new possibilities, while Ryan's suggestion of a New Year's weekend at his family's lakeside cabin offered an alternative to the annual family gathering I'd always financed at Giovanni's restaurant. Creating new traditions proved simultaneously liberating and disorienting. Selecting a small tabletop Christmas tree for my new apartment, purchasing thoughtful gifts for friends who expected nothing in return, and learning to navigate the complex emotions of celebrating while maintaining necessary distance from struggling family members. Dr. Winters provided perspective during our pre-Christmas session. Holidays intensify family dynamics because they're loaded with expectations and traditions. Your family is experiencing their first financially independent Christmas in years, which is necessary but undeniably difficult for everyone. She helped me craft boundaries that protected my well-being while acknowledging genuine concern for my family's adjustment. Compassion without capitulation, she termed it, allowing me to send Christmas cards with warm messages while maintaining financial boundaries and limited direct contact during this transitional period. The Christmas morning video call with Lauren from her parents' home in Vermont captured this new balance: genuine enjoyment of holiday traditions without the undercurrent of financial anxiety that had characterized family celebrations for the past decade. "You look different," Lauren observed as we virtually unwrapped gifts across state lines. "More present somehow." The observation crystallized my internal transformation. I was finally participating in my own life, rather than functioning primarily as the solution to others' financial problems. 6 months after the Thanksgiving confrontation that transformed our family dynamic, spring arrived in Boston with its characteristic combination of lingering chill and insistent new growth. My own life had blossomed in unexpected directions. The small but bright one-bedroom condo I'd purchased in March, weekend hiking adventures with Ryan that had evolved into comfortable routine, and the professional certification I had finally completed with the time and resources previously diverted to family support. Financial independence had been a steep learning curve for my family, requiring adjustments few imagined possible when our confrontation began. Mom had increased her administrative hours to full-time status, securing modest health benefits that reduced their medical expenses. Dad swallowed his pride and accepted a position at his brother, Uncle Robert's property management company, allowing him to reduce the physical strain of warehouse work while maintaining steady income. Most significantly, they downsized from their 4-bedroom suburban house to a 2-bedroom condominium closer to their workplaces, eliminating the burdensome mortgage that had consumed so much of my income over the years. Olivia experienced perhaps the most profound transformation, facing genuine financial independence for the first time at 28. The repossession of her car became a catalyst for practical changes. Moving from her parents' suburban home to a shared apartment near Boston's public transportation system, accepting an entry-level position at a local marketing firm rather than holding out for her ideal role, and developing basic financial literacy under Uncle Robert's patient guidance. Our reconciliation began gradually, initiated by Mom's handwritten letter in February, acknowledging specific ways they had taken my support for granted while expressing genuine regret for the Thanksgiving confrontation. "We never meant to become dependent," she wrote in careful script. Each crisis seemed temporary until suddenly years had passed, with you carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. The letter avoided emotional manipulation or financial requests, focusing instead on accountability and her hope for eventual healing. Signs of the personal work she'd begun with a counselor at her church. Dad's journey toward reconciliation proved more complicated, his pride creating barriers to the straightforward acknowledgement Mom had managed. His initial contact came through Uncle Robert, who relayed Dad's struggle to verbalize his complex emotions about our estrangement. "He's never been good with words," Uncle Robert explained during a lunch meeting in early spring. "But he hasn't missed a day of work since starting at the company, and he's been meeting with Pastor Williams weekly to discuss family relationships." These indirect efforts represented significant steps for a man who had previously channeled all emotional discomfort into criticism or financial demands. Our first direct conversation occurred in April, a cautious coffee meeting at neutral territory, halfway between our homes. The initial awkwardness gradually yielded to genuine, if halting, conversation, as Dad described their downsizing process, new budget discipline, and the consulting role he'd developed at Uncle Robert's company. "Your mother keeps that folder," he admitted, staring into his coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes. "The one with all the receipts. Says it reminds her never to take anyone's help for granted again." This oblique acknowledgement of my decade of support represented a breakthrough in his typical pattern of minimizing contributions that didn't align with his self-perception as family provider. Olivia's transformation proved most surprising, as genuine independence fostered maturity previously hidden beneath entitlement. Our relationship rebuilt slowly through monthly sister lunches, where financial topics remained off-limits by mutual agreement. "I never learned to stand on my own because no one expected me to," she confessed during our third lunch. "It's terrifying and exhausting, but also weirdly satisfying to pay my own bills." The wellness coaching business remained her long-term dream, but she developed practical steps toward that goal. Establishing emergency savings, developing marketable skills through her current position, and researching business courses at community colleges, rather than expecting immediate funding from external sources. By summer, we'd established new family parameters that balanced connection with appropriate boundaries. Monthly family dinners replaced weekly obligations, with each adult responsible for their own financial needs, rather than unspoken expectations of my support. These gatherings sometimes included Ryan, whose outsider perspective helped maintain our healthier dynamics when old patterns threatened to reemerge. Dad occasionally slipped into financial complaints or indirect requests, but Mom's gentle course corrections and my own firm boundaries prevented regression to previous exploitation. The most profound lesson emerged not from dramatic confrontation, but through consistent reinforcement of healthy limitations. Genuine family bonds strengthen rather than deplete their members. Loving someone doesn't mean financing their choices, and relationships built on mutual respect outlast those founded on financial dependence. My professional insights as a financial consultant found unexpected application in establishing structured assistance when appropriate. When Mom needed dental work uncovered by her insurance, I offered a clearly defined contribution with specific limits, rather than open-ended responsibility. When Olivia requested guidance on establishing her business, I provided consultation on her business plan, rather than startup capital. These boundaries allowed genuine generosity without enabling renewed dependency. The ultimate gift of that painful Thanksgiving confrontation wasn't financial independence, but rather the opportunity for authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation. Mom discovered strengths beyond her previous identity as a dependent spouse. Dad found value in contributing appropriately to family welfare, rather than criticizing others' efforts. And Olivia developed a self-sufficiency that no external funding could have provided. For myself, the transformation extended beyond financial freedom to fundamental identity shifts, recognizing my worth beyond what I could provide others, establishing relationships where care flowed reciprocally rather than in a single direction, and building future plans based on authentic desires rather than others' expectations. The modest condo I purchased represented not just financial investment, but belief in my right to prioritize personal goals alongside family connections. The growing relationship with Ryan demonstrated partnership possibilities unimaginable during years of family financial entanglement. The monthly ballet classes, weekend hikes, and evening book discussions reflected investment in personal development previously sacrificed to others' financial needs. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted? I'd love to hear experiences in the comments below. Sometimes walking away from toxic financial relationships is the hardest but most necessary step toward genuine healing for everyone involved. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more authentic conversations about complex family dynamics, and hit that like button to help others find this content. Your support means everything as we navigate these challenging but important topics together. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey. And remember, true family support empowers growth rather than enabling dependence.